So, as some of you may know, the Super Bowl was this past Sunday, and the actual game was incredibly boring. Much like the Kendrick and Drake beef, the likable team was up from the start and never really lost their lead. And speaking of Kendrick, guess who did the halftime show?
Pickable. I just put the boogers in my chain. Pickable.
Yeah, so Kendrick Lamar, my GOAT, did the Super Bowl halftime show this year, and I wasn't gonna make a video on it, but honestly, the performance was just really interesting, a lot more interesting than I think I personally expected it even to be. And it serves as a really great cap on all the Kendrick beef coverage that I've done this year, and also as a really great cap on like the beef in general. Kendrick's final statement piece of sorts on Drake, and the full embodiment of what this beef has tried to convey. If you don't already know, I do a lot of Kendrick coverage on this channel. I've talked a lot this year about Kendrick's diss tracks and their deeper meaning for his career as a whole, to pretty good success, I would say. So I figured I kind of had to make something about this Super Bowl performance that so is rooted in the beef and this last year for Kendrick. If you've already seen some videos breaking down the performance and what all of the symbolism in it meant, don't worry, we're tackling this from a different angle, so you're not just going to be getting like recycled points. And go check out any of the wonderful creators who do like moment by moment breakdowns if you want that kind of video. But in this video, I'm going to be talking more big picture than those other breakdowns, kind of exploring what this means for Kendrick's career, where he's at right now, and how it serves as a real finale to his beef with Drake. So here are just a few observations I made watching the performance. I hope y'all enjoy.
It's your uncle, Sam.
So first off, I do want to talk about the conceptual side of the performance, because obviously this is a very conceptual, very heady performance, had lots of symbolism in it, which people have been talking about to death and breaking down, which again, I don't really plan to do like point by point, but I will say this was a really unexpected thing for me. I didn't think Kendrick would take it this far. You know, Kendrick always excels as a performer and as a conceptual artist, but I don't think I really expected that he would bring that conceptual edge to the Super Bowl of all places, because that is such a kind of crowd-pleasing event, one where you're very much not supposed to do these very flamboyant, very conceptual things. You're supposed to just play your hits, give a good performance, get out of there, and make everyone happy, right? And look, I think Kendrick gave a very, on paper, good Super Bowl performance, but he definitely instilled it with a lot more thought and care than I think other artists do, at least in terms of like the conceptual edge to it. And I noticed that the way he did it was very similar to something that I personally saw him do on the Mr. Morale tour from 2022, which I was lucky enough to attend. And on that tour, Kendrick really played up the story of Mr. Morale by using songs from elsewhere in his career. Mr. Morale is a record about growth and regression and the ups and downs of basically personal healing. And Kendrick kind of explored how that theme was present throughout his entire career by using different songs from different eras to fill in for moments of regression and then also progress. So like a DNA would be a moment of regression, and maybe an All Right would be a moment of forward progress. And the tour basically just saw Kendrick drawing on all these different facets and points in his wide catalog to build a narrative that was very satisfying and very fulfilling and very cohesive to what Mr. Morale was. And I think Kendrick at the Super Bowl is doing very much the same. You know, he's taking the character of Uncle Sam, here portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson, and he's using that as a means to travel through different eras, different vibes in his career. You know, Uncle Sam will say, "You're doing too much." And then Kendrick will say, "I'll slow it down." So he's doing Luther, and then he's doing All the Stars, and he's doing songs with SZA. Or maybe Uncle Sam will say something that challenges Kendrick, and then he'll be like, "Okay, whatever." And then he's playing Not Like Us and DNA and all these songs from different eras of his career to basically get across this one message, which I think for Kendrick works very well, because a lot of the themes that he tackles across his whole body of work are very interconnected and very similar, although he does tackle them in many different ways. You know, Kendrick has a set of topics that he likes to stick pretty closely to in his music, of course, tackling them from different angles and exploring them in different ways. But it ultimately makes for a very cohesive performance when he has to kind of mismatch different songs from all different points in his career to fit a performance like the Super Bowl. And I did want to talk a little bit more about Samuel L. Jackson playing Uncle Sam and what I think that means. Also, the whole video game motif with Kendrick playing the American game, basically trying to please Uncle Sam with his performance, but also like not be too sanitized or washed down. And I think this performance, more than anything, really made me consider like the game as a concept in terms of this beef. I think in a lot of ways, this entire conflict with Drake was Kendrick kind of playing the game in a sense, trying to strike that balance that America wants to see, but then also covertly getting his own messages across in the process. So what I mean by that, Mr. Morale was a record all about self-growth and healing and looking inside oneself and progress and coming together and community. But it was also a record that was very dense in its themes, and I think very hard for a lot of casual fans to understand or grasp on like a deeper level. Of course, there were those songs that really drove home the points in a clear way, like I think of like Father Time as an example. But Mr. Morale is definitely still one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult record of Kendrick's whole career to like fully process. And because of that, when Kendrick came back this year to do his little beef thing with Drake, a lot of the themes that arose out of that were themes that we saw presented on Mr. Morale. He broke Drake down as a person, basically to bring others together, and then also to encourage self-reflection in his fan base, right? Go check out my other Kendrick videos for my explanation on all of that. And I feel like that really was Kendrick kind of playing the game. What the culture wants to see isn't necessarily this big album about how Kendrick went to therapy and did self-growth and, talked to this therapist, Eckhart Tolle, and learned all these things about past life regression and self-care and things like that. The people kind of want to see a rap beef, and Kendrick decided to deliver on that this past year, of course, but he did it on his own terms, which I think kind of this performance was really an embodiment of that as well. You have Uncle Sam telling Kendrick he needs to do this, needs to do that. And Kendrick in some ways tries to play the game, tries to give a crowd-pleasing performance, which I think he definitely did. But at the same time, he's getting across those deeper messages. He's going a little bit more under the surface than you would necessarily expect him to do. One of my favorite examples of this, the fact that Kendrick did Man at the Garden at the Super Bowl. This is a very like introspective, personal song, sits alongside like DNA and Humble in these big commercial tracks for Kendrick. And I think that's a prime example of Kendrick slipping in these more complex messages into what ultimately is a performance that had a lot of people dancing and singing along. It was a Super Bowl performance at the end of the day. I also think it was very interesting for Kendrick to have Samuel L. Jackson there because Jackson is such a massive collaborator with Quentin Tarantino. And Kendrick has this line on GNX, neck on Alejandro, Tarantino, Spike Lee. So I feel like the inclusion of Sam Jackson might be a little subtle nod to that line, a light flex, like, yeah, like I am, like a Tarantino, like I have Samuel L. Jackson. Maybe that's a reach. I don't know. I feel like it's Kendrick. Everybody's reaching. Let me have my reach, right?
Be humble. Sit down. Hold up.
So I do also want to mention that I was kind of shocked to see Kendrick stick mostly to just newer material, specifically material from just like Damn and GNX, which I did kind of expect a more career-spanning halftime show. I thought we'd get some good Kid Mad City songs, like a Mad City or a Money Trees, maybe even some To Pimp a Butterfly songs like King Kunta or All Right, even though that record is a little bit less accessible. But nope, none. Which honestly, I can understand. It is a Super Bowl halftime show. Kendrick kind of has to condense things down. But at the same time, again, going back to his tour that I got to see, I feel like in that tour, Kendrick was taking songs from literally every era of his career and weaving them together to make a very cohesive narrative. And I think if there is one big disappointment for me in this halftime show, it's that Kendrick didn't reach further in his catalog to pull together this story that he told, because it was a very effective story, with Uncle Sam and with playing the game and all this metaphor and symbolism. But I feel like it would have been a bit cooler if Kendrick was able to draw on songs from Good Kid, Mad City to Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, it would really feel like the culmination of his career. Because in so many ways, Kendrick performing at the Super Bowl, being the first rapper ever to headline a Super Bowl solo, like that feels like a big moment for Kendrick and kind of like the culmination of what his career has been so far. And I guess I just would have liked to see a bit more diversity in the songs he chose for the set list, outside of just GNX, Beef songs, and Damn, which I love those records. Don't get me wrong, those are some of my favorite albums like ever. And I think GNX is obviously one that he needs to draw from because one, it's the most recent, and two, it's incredibly commercial. But I feel like for a rapper as big and as storied as Kendrick is, there was maybe more he could have pulled from there. That being said, there was one song choice that got me really, really interested here, and that was the first song, the unreleased snippet from the GNX teaser that we heard. So maybe I'm just being delusional because, in 2015, Kendrick released the All Right music video. It had a banger snippet at the start, and we've never heard that song ever after that point, and we probably never will. And I feared the same was going to be the case for the Squabble Up snippet that we heard at the start of the Not Like Us music video. But thankfully, we got that track, and now I feel like, okay, is this maybe an expectation that when Kendrick teases a song, we'll actually hear it maybe? I don't know. Maybe that's a crazy concept. But I feel like at this point, Kendrick has to release this song he's teased twice now. And I don't know what the means of doing that is going to be. I don't know if that's a GNX Part 2 or a GNX Deluxe. We have heard a lot about there being a deluxe version of GNX. So I kind of assume the song will be on that and we'll get that eventually. But the song is a banger. I love that little string sample in it. It's very ominous, very tone setting. And then the beat drop is great. I think it's really interesting that that's the first one he performed, given that that's a song we literally do not even know what the name of is at this point, which is crazy. But in my opinion, it was a hell of a way to start a show. And I really, really do hope we get that song and get it soon. Fingers crossed on a big GNX Deluxe or Part 2 or just another record that caps off this era of Kendrick's career even further. And then I'll have, more videos I have to make, but it will be worth it. Okay, and then my real last big thing that I have to talk about with this performance, the elephant in the room, Not Like Us.
Hey, I'm tripping, I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like fuck.
So Kendrick did, in fact, perform this song, which there was a big debate leading into it on if Kendrick was going to be able to do Not Like Us, if he would dare to do it at the Super Bowl, because it is such an explicit song calling Drake, not good things.
Say Drake, I hear you like I'm young.
And then, of course, Drake sued Kendrick over the song. So there's the whole legal element of it, if Kendrick can actually legally perform this track. But you know what? He did it, and I have thoughts. Obviously, Not Like Us is a song I've thought a lot about. It's one that I made a whole half-hour video on. Definitely go check that out. It's linked somewhere. It's one of my best videos. But Not Like Us was definitely the biggest moment of the show. And I think there's an interesting question in there about how, as Kendrick, do you make this song, which is essentially a beef song against Drake, into a moment that serves more Kendrick than it does Drake. I think it would be a shame if Kendrick's big Super Bowl moment was spent just talking about Drake. I feel like it has to mean more. It has to mean more for Kendrick. And obviously that song is one filled with meaning. It's an anthem that really ties into a lot of the themes that Kendrick was trying to get across on Mr. Morale and really has been trying to push for his entire career. But I don't think a lot of people know that, which is why I was really interested to see Kendrick kind of lead into the song and then give a little kind of spoken word setup for the track, talking about this is bigger than just beef. This is about history and race and community and things like that. I just felt like that was a very smart setup to the track, and one that I really appreciated as someone who feels like Not Like Us gets really overlooked for its deeper messages. What that phrase Not Like Us kind of represents on just a cultural level. It's a lot more than just a Drake beef song, even though that is largely what it is reduced to and probably will be seen as for maybe the remainder of Kendrick's career. I think Kendrick did a really good job of just presenting Not Like Us in a way that a lot of people really won't have thought about before. And I do hope that people watch this Super Bowl performance, and as they pick apart like the different symbols and ideas, they tie it all back to Not Like Us as the centerpiece of this show, and see that the track is working on a much deeper level and kind of what it represents for Kendrick, what it represents, as like going against Uncle Sam in America, and how it is bigger than just Drake. And it is something more than I think what people see just on the surface. And I think the biggest moment for me that really solidified that this is bigger than Drake was the choice to end with TV Off as the true final song there after even Not Like Us. These are two very similar songs, Kendrick on a very vibrant West Coast mustard beat, but where Not Like Us is very Drake focused, TV Off is very just community focused, it's very world focused. Kendrick is talking about, turn the TV off. Like he's telling that to everyone listening, and he's not just focusing the track at Drake, like, hey, you need to fix yourself. He's like, hey, like as a whole, we need to fix ourselves. Let's turn the TV off. Let's stop watching the game in front of us and let's focus on what's real. And obviously he's still getting that message across in a very crowd pleasing way. TV Off is a banger song that's very catchy, but at the same time, he is still conveying that message. I think the whole idea of having mustard out there, when we talk about Mr. Morale and then also this beef as a means for Kendrick to just kind of get across a sense of community and togetherness. Like, what is more of a togetherness moment than him and Mustard sharing that stage as Kendrick just screams Mustard's name like over a crazy beat? Like, what is a better example of community than that? Let's be so for real. And TV Off coming right after Not Like Us is very, it's very intentional, because TV Off really does echo a lot of the sentiments of Watch the Party Die, that single Kendrick released after the beef, where he was basically talking about, it's bigger than Drake. It's this whole culture of the party, of dancing around real issues that we need to end. And TV Off is very much, turn the TV off. Let's focus on what's real, what's in front of us. And after that track, it says game over, which I think is very intentional. The game that Kendrick was playing with Drake is now over. The game that we all play where we kind of overlook the real issues underneath the surface, that needs to be over as well. And I think it was interesting that Kendrick chose this song because earlier in the performance, he quotes Gil Scott-Heron and says, "The revolution will not be televised." A very famous quote, and one that I think, the revolution will not be televised, turn the TV off. Like that's a very powerful concept, and one that I think speaks very well to what Kendrick is trying to do with this entire beef and what he's accomplished in this past year, especially with this Super Bowl performance. Although it is ironic that the protester for Palestine in Sudan got censored on the broadcast, when we're talking about tackling real important social issues. Free Palestine, free Sudan. Shout out Kendrick at the Super Bowl. That's all I have to say. Yes, guys. So those are my Super Bowl thoughts. Super Bowl Kendrick was very amazing to me. There's a lot of stuff I left out because it would basically just be gushing about stuff that I personally just really enjoyed. Obviously, SZA did a wonderful job. I thought the staging and costuming was wonderful. The choreography was great, and I love the colorful American flag kind of concept behind it all. I thought that was really cute and really worked for the performance. Yes, I am a massive Bills fan. They should have been at that Super Bowl. I freaking hate the Chiefs, but I mean, who doesn't? And before I go, I do want to, as always, shout out my Patreon supporters. It is y'all's support that keeps this channel alive and running, especially in the winter months where I just make less money off YouTube because views are down across the whole platform. Hoping that this Kendrick breakdown will bring in a little bit of attention, perhaps, to the channel. And the absolute biggest shout out to all my patrons in the shout out tiers. Special thanks to Alex C, Big D, Anya May, Onyx, Sophie Villarot, Always Been Taken, Alex Mirabal, and Grace. And yeah, guys, with that, another Kendrick video in the books. Hopefully not the last one for a minute. I hope that we do get that GNX Deluxe. But as always, I have been Ellie. Y'all have been wonderful. And until next time, bye.